She is introduced not as a comet flashing across a single season, but as living testimony that radiance can endure the fall and return brighter. Cameron Diaz, the face audiences remember as Tina Carlyle in The Mask. The chaotic, heartbreaking Mary in There's Something About Mary. The kind, steady voice behind Princess Fiona in Shrek. Stands before us again in memory and breath, reminding the world that shine means more than sparklet, means surviving the plunge and climbing back. From Long Beach's modest rooms to stages that hummed with cameras, from the ache of being overlooked to the hush that follows applause. She learned to turn simplicity into grace and vulnerability into a backbone. And now, at 53, we step into her storm-sung symphony, where every note carries both thunder and sunrise. Comment 53, or write Rip Cameron Diaz, to honor them. The geography of her beginning is humble and warm. San Diego arrival. Long Beach upbringing, a house that kept love even when it could not keep the chill from slipping through the walls. Cameron Diaz, August 30th, 1970. Two grew up, where labor clocked in before dawn and came home after dark. Emilio left for the oil yard smelling of metal and gasoline and returned with fatigue stitched into his shoulders. Billy balanced the books of an import-export world while holding a home together with gentle ferocity. Shyamine learned early how to share light in rooms that ran on hope. The exchange was constant. Hours for dollars, sleep for survival. But those small rooms held large lessons. A humming refrigerator grew louder than silence. Laughter tried to drown out unpaid bills. Weekends meant aluminum cans, the clink a private hymn of perseverance. A child can learn to smile like armor. Hers did. The ache was not hunger so much as invisibility too tall, too restless. A Cuban surname braided with English-German roots, and the sense of standing just beyond the circle. Even teachers sometimes looked past her. She laughed anyway, a music that hid the sting. In Long Beach hallways and public schoolyards where, years later, another dreamer named Snoop Dogg would be remembered, she learned that happiness isn't found, it is built. Comment 53 or write, Rip Cameron Diaz, to honor them. 16 came like a door unlatched by ocean wind. The salt in the air smelled like freedom, the unknown tasted like risk. Emilio kissed her forehead, proud and worried. Billy pressed folded bills they could not spare into her palm. A modeling contract promised airports and neon, sweets and shadows. With a borrowed suitcase and courage that trembled but did not retreat, she stepped out. She did not yet know the world would test before it welcomed. But she knew this. Everything she wanted would have to be earned, not as bitterness but as peace. Comment 53 or write Rip Cameron Diaz, to honor them. Tokyo did not put garlands on arrivals. It offered cold air that smelled of rain and electric signs, a cramped room with peeling paint. 3 other girls with the same dream stitched to their ribs. And a radiator that went silent when the night grew cruel. Breath hung in the air like a ghost. Trains pounded the dark. She learned the arithmetic of rationing instant noodles. The ritual of boiling water on a weary burner. The sweetness of laughter when dinner had nothing left to give. She whispered English into the quiet so she would not lose her name in translation. From Tokyo to Sydney, Milan to Paris, the skyline shifted but the ache was consistent. a chipped mirror, a suitcase that carried hope and frayed hems, fingers numbed by sink water that bit like winter teeth, a storm that soaked through the only coat. She lifted her face to the gray and laughed because tears would fracture what hunger had not. A photographer mocked her accent. She smiled into the lens while her jaw shook behind the pose. She walked miles between castings, tissue stuffed into blistered heels, dreams dragging like a shadow that refused to detach. Some nights, a station bench was both bed and witness. When fever crept in, pride kept her stitched to her coat through shivering hours. The fear was not of ending. It was of erasing, of leaving no trace. So she wrote her name in a cheap notebook, evidence that she existed, that one day the world would have to say it back. Poverty did not take her dignity. It polished it to something fierce. Comment 53, or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. She returned to Los Angeles at 21. Thinner in body, sharper in will, illusions pared away to light that would not dim. In 1994, someone called with a small part opposite a rising tornado of comedic energy named Jim Carrey. She walked into the room with nothing left to protect, but everything left to give. She did not so much perform as remember. When she smiled, the air changed, a theater of the heart silence, falling like velvet. A single yes cracked the sky. Cameras would catch the afterglow, but that moment belonged to the quiet within her, the part that had kept walking when comfort would have been easier. Comment or write Rip Jim Carrey to honor them. The first day on set felt less like triumph, more like an endurance run that she suddenly knew how to finish. Lights radiated heat, cameras felt like living instruments, and the pause before action boomed louder than trains in winter. The soundstage breathed. Cables coiled like veins. Jim turned with that electric grin and told her to breathe. She did, and the world narrowed to one honest intention: action. Fear melted into focus. Trembling found rhythm. A girl from Long Beach disappeared, and Tina Carlyle stood where she had been waiting to be born. The take ended in the same silence as the audition, the kind of silence that means a room has made up its mind. The mask blasted across the world, hundreds of millions. Charts and noise and doors swinging open, but numbers were only proof of something already proven in bone. She wanted this as much as breath. Comment 53, or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. Fame arrived without mercy or manual. It felt less like freedom than like schedule call sheets stacked like tiles. Flights folding into each other until dawn felt like a rumor. Interviews that ran past midnight, and a new ritual: waking in a hotel unsure of the city. The body began to buckle. Migraines, exhaustion, a fatigue that sleep could not persuade. But momentum roared. Between 1994 and 1998, she climbed without pause. My Best Friend's Wedding warmed audiences. There's Something About Mary carved her into iconography. At 26, her face sold covers, her name pulled crowds, her work turned laughter into currency. The price rose unseen, panic unfurling in backstage corners. Days that started in darkness and ended there too. I was working every hour, everywhere, she would say, not as complaint, but as weather report. Success had stopped being a pursuit and become a current sweeping her forward. Comment 53, or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. The early 2000s amplified the chorus. Charlie's Angels in 2000, its 2003 follow-up. Paydays that placed her atop Hollywood's ledgers. Choreography that bruised knees and decorated limbs with the map of stunts. At 3 a.m., after 20 hours. Mascara freckled the edges of a tired face as she walked barefoot over a cold studio floor and thought, "This is what the number feels like, work distilled to a presence that costs." Between takes, she sat with her head cradled in her hands for 30 seconds of reclaimed quiet. Then stood when the word came again, action. She wanted a canvas beyond box office. Vanilla Sky 2001, Gangs of New York 2002, darker corners, deeper angles, a hunger to prove she was not merely a smile the world bought by the mile. Praise followed, awards whispered her name, and fatigue kept pace, pairing triumph with the stillness after applause that could feel like emptiness. Comment 53, or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them by 2014, after The Other Woman sextape and Annie. The wattage flickered. A balance sheet could still applaud. The echo in her chest did not. The fortune decades in the making stood tall, but spirit asked for a reckoning. One morning she realized she could not remember the last time she recognized herself. If she kept moving at the same speed, she might outrun the person she had promised to protect. So she stopped. Not a failure, an understanding. 2 decades in a furnace had forged and scarred in the same measure. She had given youth, sleep, silence. Hollywood had given glory and vacancy. Taking back her time was not walking away. It was walking toward her own light. Comment 53, or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. Storms did not all come from sets and spotlights. One began years before she was famous. In 1992, she trusted a photographer with a private shoot. Later, when her face had become familiar to strangers across continents, he tried to make a ransom of those images. Millions demanded to keep them hidden. The world held its breath to see whether she would bend. She did not. What followed was not a skirmish, but a long corridor of filings, hearings, rooms where fluorescent lights made everything lonelier. Questions repeated, delays stretched, and betrayal replayed like a loop with the sound turned up. She kept showing up. You don't fight because you want to. You fight because the alternative steals your own reflection. In 2005, the scales tilted the way they should. Prison time for the man who forged and threatened. Even then there was no celebration. Only the soft relief that comes when you've held your ground without losing your center. Dignity, not triumph, defined the finish. Comment 53, or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. Another squall in that same year was born of invention rather than theft. A tabloid printed a lie that spread like ink in water, allegations of betrayal while she was with Justin Timberlake. Rumor machines churned, televisions glowed with hot takes. Strangers argued about a pain that didn't belong to them. Silence can sound like guilt under such lights. She chose another instrument. Depositions, statements, the strain of preparing for truth in rooms designed for scrutiny. She did it all while the headlines tried to make old wounds new again. When the matter closed, the retraction and public apology were printed, but victories of that kind don't quiet the ache. They simply confirm survival. Fame had been generous, It also taught her how easily people accept the loudest version of untruth. Comment or write rip Justin Timberlake to honor them. So she did the unexpected. She disappeared from the noise. No podium, no manifesto, just a gentle closing of the door. Interviews went quiet. Camera flashes receded. At home in Los Angeles, the same hands that once accepted trophies learned tea steam and garden soil again. Plants no one photographed grew under her care. The city's nighttime shimmer felt colder and less necessary from that window. She called the stillness healing, not absence. Cooking, walking, writing, breathing, day by day. A woman who had been everywhere learned to re-inhabit one room at a time. Comment 53, or write rip Cameron Diaz to honor them by 2013. She reappeared not as a character but as an author and advocate. The Body Book. Later the Longevity Book, where the craft of endurance found words instead of scenes. Pain became purpose. Scars became instruction. You don't escape hurt. You transform it. When she stepped away from acting in 2014, some read departure. She felt arrival. The storms had not dimmed her. They had clarified her. Not a star burned out, but a light reclaimed. Comment 53, or write rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. Before the red carpets remapped her life, love had been a small apartment and a shared dream. In 1990, at 18, she met Carlos Dieper, a video producer who saw past magazine gloss to the nervous laugh and wide-open hope. Coffee and film tape scented their days. Success began to knock. He celebrated with cheap champagne and belief. The distance between shoots soon changed into distance between hearts. No explosions. Only a gentle parting, the kind that leaves a note on a kitchen counter that says you were never meant to stay small. When she spoke of her first real heartbreak later, she called him the calm before the storm, and meant it with gratitude. Comment or write rip Carlos Dieter to honor them. Then came the chapter that looked golden from the outside. Matt Dillon and Cameron Sue energies, both searching for something real in a town that trades in replicas. Weekends by the coast with windows down, radios loud, the illusion that fame could be kept on the porch while love lived inside. As her orbit grew, my best friend's wedding, there's something about Mary the air thinned. Success devours hours. Hours gnaw at tenderness. The unspoken gathered, rooms left quietly, smiles that felt rehearsed. A balcony conversation above a city that sparkled like it was pretending to be stars. We've become a story, she said. He nodded. The ending was without fireworks, and maybe that was mercy. Later, they both described it like a wound that taught and a love that blessed. Comment or write rip Matt Dillon to honor them. A quieter love followed after a year of listening to silence as if it were a language. Jared Leto arrived as stillness instead of spectacle. Late 1999 became early 2000. Weekends at home with curtains half drawn, guitar strings and script pages and dishes left for morning. She did not have to perform. He did not need her to. They were the quiet couple and smiled at the accuracy. The piece held until career tides pulled in different directions her sets. His music, the spaces between visits turning into a map of absence. By winter 2002, a phone reached only a song on voicemail. a guitar leaning against the wall wrote the last sentence. Their partying in early 2003 matched their beginning, gentle, private, undefended. Later, gratitude replaced ache. Sometimes love does not disappear. It changes shape. Comment or write Rip Jared Leto to honor them. Where silence had been a bomb, fire came next. In 2003, under the playful glare of the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, she met Justin Timberlake Youth, crashing into grace, laughter that made the room pause. They held hands through red carpets and tried to hold privacy as well. Tours and film schedules stretched the distance thin until rumors tried to rip it entirely. She did not accept the lie. She fought it and won, though the law's pace meant living with the rumor's echo longer than any heart would choose. At the 2007 Golden Globes, silver fabric and practiced poise couldn't mute the small fracture that opened when she watched him from across the room. Their statement said, respect and love remained. Grief still did its honest work afterward. Time, the kind everyone else cannot see, taught her to breathe again. Comment or write Rip Justin Timberlake to honor them. And then, as if a compass finally settled north, she chose the smaller life that proved larger. Absence from headlines was not retreat. It was repair. She measured her days by quiet rituals that asked for no audience lemon water, a notebook, a walk. The applause outside dimmed. The pulse inside steadied. She had not lost her light. She had learned where to set it down. Comment 53, or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. What followed the long hush was not a triumphant overture, but a steady chord. She had learned to measure days by breath and small rituals, to lace mourning with patience, to let the hum of ordinary life become music. Into that quiet stepped a man whose presence did not demand a stage. Benji Madden arrived without spotlights. Introduced not by billboards, but by a dinner table, where laughter moved easily, and listening counted as its own kind of devotion. He did not ask her to recreate the world's idea of her. He asked nothing but honesty and time. The pull was not fireworks. It was gravity. She, who had finally learned not to chase, felt herself choosing. Within months, the woman who once measured love by red carpets and tour schedules discovered a different meter. Shared dishes in the sink. Playlists drifting down a hallway. Silence that comforted instead of judging. In a living room in January 2015, vows were spoken in a circle tight enough to keep warmth in and noise out. Hands trembled, eyes shone, and the ceremony ended not in headlines but in a hush that felt like home. Marriage did not present itself as a perfect ribboned finale. It asked for daily choosing, for edges sanded by patience, for pauses that allowed laughter to return of its own will. On tired nights, he still set a cup beside her. On early mornings, she still brushed a kiss across his shoulder in thanks. This was partnership as practice, tenderness as decision, life as a room you keep sweeping, no matter who is visiting. Comment or write Rip Benji Madden to honor them. The friends who had opened that first door were part of a quiet constellation Nickel Richie by a brotherly thread. Family knitted by introductions that became safety. Around the table the stories were without costumes. She looked at the life she had built, and found that smaller could be larger. Fewer cameras, more truth. Privacy was no longer a fortress built in panic. It was a garden tended on purpose. The world could race. They would walk, comment, or write Rip Nicole Richie to honor them. There was a wish in her that had never stopped burning, even when it hid under other tasks. In 2019, long after she had learned the discipline of peace, the hope found its form. A daughter named Radix, welcomed through surrogacy. Held for the first time in a room whose machines and beeps seemed to dim as breath met breath. The arc of decades collapsed into that one weight on her chest. She had chased a world for 30 years. Now the world fit into her arms. Days reorganized themselves around the smallest schedule, rhythm of waking and rocking and the soft choreography of bottles and blankets. The exchange rate of meaning changed. Hours spent in lullabies were suddenly richer than entire franchises once had been. She traded scripts for bedtime stories, press lines for nursery shadows, and discovered a joy that did not need witnesses to make it real. Some nights she watched her child sleep and felt the starched armor of the past fall away. It wasn't about being flawless. It was about being fully there. Comment or write Rip Radix to honor them. Motherhood reframed her memories, not by erasing the old picture, but by adjusting its light. In that new glow, one face came forward, her father's, Leo Diaz, the man of grease-stained shirts and easy jokes, who carried wind and metal home on his clothes and still made room for laughter at the table. In 2008, a phone call cut the air on a day when she had been acting grief before cameras. The world then asked her to live it. Pneumonia, they said, and then the days unraveled. 58 years. A number too small to contain a life as warm as his. She left set quietly, unsure where performance ended and reality began, and followed sorrow through the rituals that do not heal so much as hold, at the service. The trees moved like the sky was trying to say what people couldn't. She listened for a sign and found only air, which is to say, she found exactly what the newly bereaved receive, the space in which love must learn another language. Back at home, she opened a drawer and found a work shirt that still held a faint scent of oil and sun. Sometimes she pressed it to her face and spoke into the cotton because memory has ears. Years went by the way years do, indifferent to a cond. She did what was required. She smiled when cameras pointed and went quiet when doors closed. Grief, however, isn't a schedule. It is a companion that changes shape. When her daughter arrived, the circle shifted. Holding that child, she suddenly understood the fierce, wordless devotion he had carried. The way love can be laughter and terror stitched together, the way protection is its own prayer. Some mornings, in the mirror's early light, she saw him in the tilt of her own smile. Some afternoons, in the sudden burst of her child's unguarded giggle, she heard his rhythm. He had once stepped into her work with pride. A quick appearance, and there's something about Mary, not for credit but for delight. That too returned as balm. Grief did not vanish. It breathed with her. It did not steal. It asked her to carry. Comment 58, or write Rip Leo Diaz to honor them. The private life built on purpose did not mean smaller dreams. It meant truer ones. Money, long the public scoreboard, had become a quiet tool. A fortune stood, but it no longer defined the architecture of her days. Instead, she laid out a table where values could sit and be counted. balance over spectacle, clarity over varnish, the joy of building things that were transparent about what they were. Avalent Clean Wine, born in 2020. With a partner who shared the same belief that labels should tell truths rather than hide, then became less a product than a philosophy. It was an invitation to gather and to know exactly what you were pouring into the glass. Offices and spreadsheets replaced call sheets and costume racks. Decisions felt like acts of stewardship rather than performance. The business became substantial not because it chased trend, but because it was stubborn about its premise. Simplicity that didn't apologize for being simple. Comment or write Rip Catherine Power to honor them. The home she made with Benji became sanctuary rather than exhibit. In rooms where lights spilled across wood floors and breezes found their way through open doors. Wealth translated into quiet. Places to read with a window for company. A kitchen that could host laughter. A garden whose seasons instructed patience. She had known mansions as sets and villas as weekend scenery. Now 4 walls meant the daily chance to unmask. You keep only what serves the peace, she learned. A dining table where dinner stretches into talk. A patio where dawn can be greeted barefoot. A nursery where the night's chaos can still feel like a lullaby. These were the luxuries that stayed. Comment or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. Even the objects that once braided identity took on new meanings. There were cars that spoke of speed and shine. And there was a quiet machine that once made environmental sense before it was fashionable. She kept what felt aligned and let the rest be memory. Jewelry, too, lived differently now. Pieces chosen not for flash but for story, the thing worn because it remembers. She had spent years being told what to wear and how to move. Now adornment was a form of keeping, not of proving. Comment 53 or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. She did not abandon the world beyond her door. She simply approached it with intention. Causes she had supported continued to call to her, the planet that raised her. The veterans who returned to a country that did not always know how to hold them. The women deciding that their health was not a footnote. The kids inheriting soil and sky. She gave not as gesture, but as repair, as recognition that you return resources to the places that taught you what matters. Some of it aligned with Live Earth's vision of a chorus for the environment. Some with organizations standing beside those who served in distant deserts and mountain valleys. Some with the nourishment of minds and bodies so that futures could be sturdier than pasts. The point was never to be seen giving. It was to stitch something kind back into a fabric, once stretched thin by demand. Comment or write Rip Al Gore to honor them. Routine, once dictated by production schedules, became a craft. Morning light across a kitchen floor, a glass of warm lemon water. Vitamins counted not as vanity but as gratitude. A few measured breaths to prove to herself she was here. If anxiety arrived dawned, it arrives for everyone. She did not ask it to vanish. She asked it to sit and teach. Movement was no longer a negotiation with a role. It was a thank you to a body that had carried her through winter streets and sound stages. Meditation replaced call times. Laughter replaced deadlines. A walk across dewy grass became more glamorous than any step hand repeat ever was. The glow remained, but it lived differently, unperformed, earned by rest and presence and the quiet bravery of saying no. Comment 53 or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. She returned to the page when she wanted to share, not to sell. The body book and the longevity book were not manifestos. They were maps, simple and steady, offering directions that did not promise youth but promised something more honest: attention, care, respect for time rather than argument with it. She spoke to women without preaching. Choose presence over perfection, process over panic, the long friendship with yourself over the fleeting applause that cannot follow you home. If a message kept recurring, it was this: aging is not loss. It is proof. Comment 53 or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. At home, the music drifted not from audiences, but from open windows. Benji tuned a guitar. In the garden, tomatoes reddened under patient sun. In a small room, bedtime arrived like tide. They lived mostly offline by design, trading the currency of being seen for the wealth of being known. Peace, she said, in practice, if not in slogans, is how love stays alive. Dinner did not require brilliance. It required presence. Bread rose because someone waited with it. Vegetables caramelized because someone stayed by the stove. In those daily, unglamorous sacraments, she found again what she had feared fame had taken: the right-sized life, where kindness and courage and calm are not ideals but habits. Comment or write Rip Benji Madden to honor them. Sometimes, in the late afternoon when sunlight turns to honey, she hears a laugh from down the hallway and feels 2 generations speaking her. Daughter's giddy sparkle ringing against memory's deeper bell. A shirt remains in a drawer, softer every year, still capable of carrying the scent of a man who taught her that work done honestly is its own sort of song. A guitar leans in a corner, the echo of a goodbye that chose tenderness. A bracelet lies cool in a drawer, symbol of years that taught rather than broke. She does not keep these as relics. She keeps them as proof that love, even when it changes shape, keeps offering directions. Comment 58 or write Rip Olio Diaz to honor them. When she speaks now, when she allows herself to be seen, she does it without armor. She does not deny the storms. She names them and lets them be, whether she navigated. She has learned the discipline of standing in a room and letting silence be the most eloquent thing present. She has discovered that apology is unnecessary when you are simply choosing what keeps you whole. And she has accepted that fame can be useful but cannot be trusted to tell the truth about a person. The truth is in the mornings. The truth is in the way she sets a table. The truth is in how she listens to a child asking for the 1000th time for the same story. Comment 53 or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them. She is still, in the world's memory, Tina with the incandescent entrance, Mary with the reckless sweetness, Fiona with the voice that taught a fairy tale to measure beauty from the inside out. But in the room she chooses, she is Cameron, unadorned, unafraid, bearing the life she built the long way. From can-collecting weekends to contracts signed in far-off cities. From laughter performed for cameras to laughter that ambushes her in her own kitchen. From battles waged in courtrooms to the peace of not needing to explain. From the currency of attention to the wealth of time, this is the arc. She didn't reject her past, and she didn't surrender to it. She wove it into something she could wear every day. Comment 53 or write Rip Cameron Diaz to honor them.